Well, we're going to dive into this big business breakdown on Walgreens, formerly known as Walgreens Boots Alliance. WBA. And Walgreens integrates retail with healthcare services. And so for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with Walgreens or need a little bit of a refresher, Walgreens has a business model that includes three segments: pharmacy, retail, and wholesale. And I'm going to ask Jenny Rae to go over some of the high-level stats in just a minute, but let me just define these three segments so we're all on the same page. So the pharmacy segment of Walgreens business sells prescription drugs and provides pharmacy-related services. I think what's important for everybody to know here is that it's 63% of Walgreens' total revenue. So almost 2/3 of Walgreens' revenue comes from its pharmacy segment. Walgreens also has a retail segment. So they sell healthcare and other retail products, including non-prescription drugs, beauty products, toiletries, general merchandise. I think all of us probably have been inside of a Walgreens. We know that there's a wide selection of merchandise available to buy just over the counter. And that retail segment of Walgreens business accounts for 23% of its annual revenue. So about a quarter of its revenue comes from retail. And then the remaining 15% of Walgreens revenue comes from its wholesale and other line of business. So its wholesale line of business was formed just 5 years ago in partnership with McKesson, right? And so Walgreens owns a 70% controlling equity interest in this kind of combined wholesale business. And I think we all know that a wholesale business is just kind of selling, holding, distributing products that are manufactured by other manufacturers. And so Walgreens is getting into, in the last 5 years, this wholesale business as well. And then kind of the other part of Walgreens business refers to its technology-enabled care model. So Walgreens offers clinical programs. It collaborates strategically with other businesses inside of the Walgreens Boots kind of portfolio to provide healthcare services. So Walgreens does a lot, but as we've seen, 2/3 of its revenue is driven by its pharmacy segment. And so with that, Jenny Rae, I'll turn things over to you. The company combines a really robust physical store network, like with a digital platform, right? It employs a multi-channel strategy. We'll get into that. But before we do, can you talk to us a little bit about the P&L?
Sure. So, Namaan, this is a tough business. I think that's just the first important thing to say, right? The business for fiscal year that ended August 31st lost money for the second year in a row. And so just kind of kicking it off, recognizing that this is a really hard business, I think is important. On sales of $148 billion, the gross profit was $27 billion, which is going to give us a really immediate clue into what kind of business we're operating here. But then they managed to turn that $27 billion and make it into a loss, a $14 billion annual operating income loss. Walgreens has an unbelievable store footprint, one of the strongest in the world, over 8,500 U.S. stores, and they don't actually cite their international stores. They say several thousand. But we can assume that it's on approximately around 50% of the scale. But it's, again, like you'd have to do a little bit more of a back of the envelope than we did for this specific call. Certainly if we were working with someone in the sector, we would do a much deeper dive on that. They have store closings planned because of these operating losses. And I'm going to just, right away put a note in the sand. I'm going to just kick off with a hot take, which is I think it's necessary. And I also think that it's not going to fix the business. Right. I think it's kind of one of those things where you can't keep bleeding money. So you need to cut off an arm, but it's a real bummer to lose an arm because you would really like to have an arm later. And these store closings are, to me, the greatest asset of Walgreens. And the problem to me is not that they have too many stores open. The problem is the operating mechanisms inside the stores, their customer retention process, customer experience, and more. And so even though as a business leader, you take that move indefinitely, I don't think that that's your ultimate goal. Your ultimate goal is not to reduce the size of the Walgreens footprint. Your ultimate goal is something else. And we'll talk about that something else as we go through it. So you want to talk about the business model, even though we just gave a giant fat clue when we were talking about the P&L?
Yeah, absolutely, Jenny Rae. Walgreens is a primarily variable cost driven business, and it doesn't mean it doesn't have fixed costs. I think when people think of Walgreens, they think of the massive physical store network and the retail footprint. They think, oh, that must be a fixed cost business because of that. But when you look at the P&L, you find actually that for every prescription that Walgreens fills, for every transaction that it facilitates, for every product that it sells, there is an incremental cost to that prescription being filled, to that product being sold. And that is a much larger share of the pie when it comes to Walgreens cost structure than its fixed cost footprint. And so Walgreens is a primarily variable cost based business that changes the way you look at the business. It changes the way that you think about turning the business around. And it changes the way that you think about what's important in terms of price versus volume. So if I'm a primarily variable cost based business, I'm looking to maximize the revenue that I can from each individual transaction and customer interaction versus just primarily thinking about volume. And so I think as we move through our discussion today, we'll be thinking more about Walgreens through that variable cost-based lens, and you'll see how that affects some of the metrics that we've thought about in terms of how to turn this business around. So Jenny Rae, I'll let you lead off with your metrics first this time. What would you be thinking about as you think about turning Walgreens around?
First, a story. So the reason I wanted to put Walgreens on our radar is that I went into a Rite Aid recently. I love Rite Aid's ice cream, even though it's kind of weird and they serve it to you basically in a giant square. I love the fact that they have it. I think that the flavors are delicious. And my kids and I do ice cream Fridays regularly. And so that was our choice for ice cream Friday. And when I walked into the Rite Aid, the stores were basically, the shelves were empty. And somebody from behind the counter was like, yeah, we're in bankruptcy. And honestly, my thought was literally the store looks just about like it normally would, and y'all are behaving just like you normally would. So sometimes you can see bankruptcies before they come, and sometimes you're just like super unsurprised. But I wanted to focus on this sector because I wanted to understand what's happening in this space right now and what are the alternatives, what are disruptable opportunities inside the space. And so when I think about the three metrics, if I were going to turn Walgreens around with this operating loss that they're going after, they're obviously trying to avoid going down the bankruptcy line, just like Rite Aid currently is. The number one thing that I think about is repurchase rate. I'll tell you what, I go to Walgreens only if I have to. And it would be a really different customer situation if you were able to get your customers back to Walgreens more frequently. So things like finding people opportunities. They have a ton of seasonal merchandise. Usually in Walgreens, about 1/8 of the store is moving seasonally, right? It's the like candy and the swag from Christmas, and now it's on to Valentine's Day, and then it will move on beyond that. But like that amount of turnover from your SKU base gives you opportunities to communicate with customers. But Walgreens doesn't give me an excuse to come in, and I try to avoid it at every chance that I can. So that's not a great customer situation or opportunity if I'm not bringing my customers into the store. And I'm only bringing them in when they have a prescription to fill or when they have something else going on. So especially on the retail side of the business, which Namaan, I don't know if you were able to dive into it. I tried. But just at the high level with the limited amount of time, I wasn't able to map the revenue to profit percentages. You know how we've kind of said, like, look, if it's membership fees, that just falls straight to the bottom line. My best guess is that wholesales are actually our highest margin on this business. Usually that's not the case for a wholesale business. And then I would say retail is next and pharmacy is third, but I don't know that for sure. And it seems like the attention inside a Walgreens is really focused on the pharmacy portion of the business, which leaves this repurchase opportunity on the table for the retail side of the business. The second one is basket size. There are ways that they've thought about this just in the basics, store design. You have to walk all the way to the back of the store, right, to get your items. But when I'm in line at a Walgreens in a drive-through, they are not offering me anything. And they could, and they should, right? What else can we give you before you walk out of here today? Here's 5 core items that people are walking out with, right? There should be a screen for me to interact with because I'm usually waiting for 5 or 7 or 8 minutes. That time should be used to merchandise the customers. And so somebody in the store running around and grabbing 14 items for me while I'm waiting to buy something else, increasing my basket size, when you have a captive customer audience is an opportunity. And in a variable cost business, that's what you're trying to do. If you make a margin on every item that you sell me, you're trying to sell me more items, and you're trying to figure out which items you're able to get to me. So if I'm fulfilling something for the cold and flu, like, please, for heaven's sakes, like, offer me, some throat lozenges and
a can of chicken soup.
A can of chicken soup and over the counter NyQuil and and something for comfort, something for fun, right? So I think like just increasing basket size is my number 2. And then the third one is the payer mix. Now, I don't want to isolate this because this could be my personal experience, but I own a small business. My small business, it does not make sense for me to pay for private insurance. So I use an exchange, which basically makes it look to medical providers like I am a cash payer. For me, the experience at Walgreens is not catered to me, but I'm an amazing customer segment for them. Like, they should want me. I might be small, but I pay every dollar that I pay. No one else is paying for. They don't have to submit that claim anywhere, and it goes straight to their bottom line. And they could charge me 50% less than somebody else and 20% more than their margin and still make money on me because of the ease of that process. Well, there's no cash pay prices. There's no price transparency. They don't really focus on that payer mix. I think they just kind of are assuming that they're going to get what they get. And so I think having the opportunity to really target specific payer mixes, especially on the pharmacy side, would transfer to the other 2 metrics that I've already mentioned. What about you, Namaan?
If you're enjoying listening to this business breakdown and learning how Namaan and Jenny Rae approach business problems, then you might benefit from the Black Belt program. Black Belt is a structured case prep program designed to help you build business acumen, crush case interview prep, land an offer, and get promoted. The program is built around 8 hours of one-on-one coaching with an MBB consultant, plus a world-class digital resource library. Our Black Belt cohorts have limited capacity each month, so don't wait around. Learn more and join today at the link in this episode's show notes.
I think those are great metrics. They're compelling. I thought about the business differently, and I think we have a little bit of disagreement here, which I love, because the first thing that I would focus on is closing underperforming stores. I agree with you that you cannot cut your way to growth, but I think where Walgreens is at today, they need to stabilize operations and they need to enhance cash flow. And I think when you are losing money, that is priority number 1. And the biggest way that you can do that is by closing underperforming stores. And the way that I define underperformance is stores that have lower revenue today than they did 3 years ago. Because I think one of the things you have to do when you think about underperformance is, okay, what does that mean in our business? And so the way that I defined it, looking at Walgreens P&L, looking at historical performance, is stores that are underperforming relative to where they were 3 years ago. I think somewhere north of 70% of the US population lives within a 5-mile radius of a Walgreens. There probably is oversaturation in terms of Walgreens retail footprint. We can afford to close underperforming stores and still retain the accessibility like in local communities that kind of sets us apart from something like maybe an Amazon pharmacy or some other competitors that are springing up. And so
I agree, by the way, with the principle of that. What I was mentioning earlier is, like, I think that I trust Walgreens not at all to actually execute on this in a way that satisfies customers. Because, in my city, there are 3 Walgreens. If you pull me to one, I might still go to Walgreens, but not if my wait time is 3x as long.
Fair.
Not if my experience is 3x as poor. And so I don't think you get that aggregate benefit until you actually are executing in store well. And I don't see that from Walgreens.
100%. I do think that you need to stabilize your core retail pharmacy operations, and they need to rationalize their retail footprint. And I agree with you. I don't think they're going to do a great job of it, but if I was there, that's what I'd be thinking about too. And I would do that first before I focus on reigniting growth. So closing those underperforming stores, rationalizing that footprint, that would be kind of job number 1 for me if I was there. The second thing I'd be thinking about is my wholesale revenue as a percentage of my overall revenue. And so the wholesale kind of line of business at Walgreens is the fastest growing piece of the pie. When I looked at historical performance at Walgreens, retail and pharmacy, those two segments have been flat for the last 2 years in terms of revenue. So like growth is coming from the wholesale side of the business. And you're right, that's also where a lot of the margin is coming from. And so again, just to reorient everybody, wholesale is the business of purchasing, storing, and distributing products from manufacturers to customers. And so I think even if we rationalize and reduce our retail footprint, we still can use that as a competitive advantage and use those locations as distribution hubs. And so I'd be thinking about wholesale revenue as a percentage of overall revenue and continuing to accelerate the growth inside of that segment of the business. The third thing that I'd be looking at is percentage of my revenue that comes from e-commerce. And I think this is now where we're starting to get to like the customer experience, right? The wait time. You were talking about, okay, like we should be looking to increase basket size by offering, right, throat lozenges with the prescription, right? I think an easier way to do that is through e-commerce and through kind of AI and machine learning driven recommendations that are like automatically kind of populated depending on what you have in your cart. And so I think the biggest threat to Walgreens pharmacy business is Amazon Pharmacy. And so I think that they need to fundamentally rethink some of their business model, right? And I actually would not be trying to increase foot traffic to bring people back into the stores as much as I'd be focused on growing the percentage of sales that are completed via my app or completed via e-commerce. And I would start to think about if I could offer prescription delivery, right? When I look at the Walgreens consumer, I see a consumer that is typically lower to middle income, right? And so I think that there's an opportunity there to maybe like to capture that consumer away from Amazon, like if that particular demographic isn't able or willing to pay for a Prime membership. And so can I keep their prescription business with me, especially if delivery or a simplified pickup experience is a part of the value proposition, right? And I'm not an expert when it comes to like pharmaceutical like regulations, but like I could see Walgreens moving to a concept like Amazon lockers, where I can like order my prescription through the app. I don't have to wait in like a 30-minute drive-through line. It's sitting in a secure locker for me, and I'm sent a code, and I can go unlock that locker, pick up my prescription, right, and leave, right? Or I can like I have been offered other like products in my cart, right? I've added those to my cart along with my prescription. My whole order is sitting right in the locker ready for me to pick up, right? So I'm able to increase basket size. I'm also able to increase the convenience factor, right? And I think that's what they're going to have to do if they're going to protect, right, 2/3 of their business from these upstart competitors that are popping up in the space.
That's good, Namaan. Yeah, I think recognizing that the main reason that people go to Walgreens is you're sick and you need a prescription. And then the other step is gravy. You cannot refocus your business onto why someone else would come into the store. So when we focus on hot takes, I really think we're going to see a complete modernization of the customer experience inside the Walgreens. And actually, I have like a way too far hot take that I'm not 100% sure is going to happen, but I think there's something on it. I think you're going to be able to get food at somewhere like this, and I think it's going to be a really simple offering, like for real milkshakes and hot dogs or something like that. But I think anytime you have a drive-through mechanism, you're going to what you want to think through is how many customers you can process through, but also how much you can get them out the door as they're going through. And so I thought, like, what is something that Costco has, Costco Pharmacy, that other people don't have? They have, you can also grab a hot dog when you're there. It's like a one-stop shop type of item. And so if I'm going to wait in line for those minutes and I'm thinking about what else I might want to purchase, some like limited amount of either co-merchandising where you have a Starbucks in the store, where you have a very like lightweight, Dunkin' Donuts or something like that, right? Where you're creating these co-reasons for orgs to exist, I think would be massive. And I expect to see probably like a third reduction in SKUs in store, and then a movement toward this increase in basket size, but more like bossy recommendations, right? For using AI. Hey, you're here for this. You probably also need these 3 things. You bought this last Christmas. You should buy it again this Christmas. just more. And I would love for them to be more intelligent about me. I think I would spend more money with them if they were.
I like that. I was in Pennsylvania this last weekend. I had lunch at a Sheetz. If you don't know Sheetz, it's a gas station, right? So I could certainly see people, picking up some comfort food as they're picking up their medicine at a Walgreens. My hot take is a little bit different. I think Walgreens is in 2025 going to split from the parent company, and I think they're going to be taken private. So when you think about private equity in the US, they're sitting on $3 trillion right now of unallocated capital. That is a hell of a lot of dry powder. And I think that like Walgreens is an attractive target for private equity to come in. And going private would give Walgreens the breathing room that it needs to streamline its operations, to cut costs, to reimagine its business model away from the scrutiny of the public markets. And so my hot take is I think Walgreens is private by the end of this year.
Love it. Well, just to wrap it up, this is a tough business when you're trying to, utilize a highly regulated pharmaceutical sector and pharmaceutical service. You have certainly staff requirements that can be really challenging to fulfill. You're trying to create a working environment for the staff members, but you're also using 95% of your footprint for something totally different. I think I think what both of us are feeling is that Walgreens is unfocused with what it needs to do. It hasn't done what it thought it needed to do. It knew that it needed to grow revenue, but it did it in a way where it didn't focus on that margin growth on the variable cost side. And so thinking about how can we get everybody who comes into the store to spend more is a different premise than how do we acquire new customers. And I think just for the season that they're in, Walgreens is ripe for disruptions.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Business Breakdowns. We record these episodes live in front of an audience, and you can join the next one. Just check us out on LinkedIn or YouTube to tune in. In addition, let us know which company you'd like to see profiled next. Just shoot us a quick email, team@managementconsulted.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.